The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra-high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, see everything we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes from Plein Air and Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. Some people have mastered the art of painting landscapes that have all this majesty, this drama. Ken Salaz is one of those guys. I think you're going to enjoy this video.
Hi, I'm Ken Salaz. I am a classically trained oil painter and a professional magician and mentalist. I got into painting as a child while I was growing up in Arizona. My father's side is Native American, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers in the desert. And I was always amazed by the beauty of the landscape and the light and all the objects and the atmosphere and the rain. And so I started by doing watercolors as a child. As I got older, I ended up going to college at Carnegie Mellon and Cooper Union. But the greatest experience of learning came with Jacob Collins at the Water Street Atelier, and I spent several summers painting up in the Catskill Mountains with him during the summer. And that is when my love for landscape painting really took off, and that's what I'd love to share with you today. I'd really like to share with you in this video something that all my students are constantly asking me, which is how do I take the complexities of nature with the lighting conditions and the movement of all the elements and make a painting that is cohesive and filled with poetry and meaning. To help the students do this, I've created something called the butterfly system, which takes the three elements that are in the landscape and in reality and the three elements of painting, and it brings them together in the middle with certain techniques and application. This system, which I will be presenting to you today, will always give you a place of reference in which how to make a decision and why you're making the decision. And that decision will also be preparing you for the next stage of your painting. So what's wonderful about this system is it will allow you to approach the problems that you encounter in your painting with confidence and a structure that'll help you find your own solutions to the problems that are going to arise on the canvas as you're painting. In the process of painting, you're going to continually come up to the question, how do I move this forward? How do I move the painting forward? And I know a lot of my experiences, I paint in circles and the painting doesn't improve, and I keep making the same mistakes. Well, this system allows you a way out of that repetitive mistake making and gives you a path forward that'll lead you to resolving closer and closer to your vision of why you began the painting in the first place. Now let's get started with my painting materials. Let's get right into the brushes. I use a lot of different kinds for different techniques. I use this flat brush. It's a number 8. It has an angle to it, so it gives you different kinds of marks on the canvas. I also use a number 12 filbert brush, and this I use to fill in large areas of the sky and water. I also have several smaller filbert brushes, sizes 2 to sizes 10, that I use for more detailed areas in the painting. Then there's the straight flat brush. Again, this is a number 8. And finally, the liner brush, which is used for the detailed, mostly for the up-close sections of the painting. Then there's the fun brushes. And there's the chopped up old fan brush that I took scissors to and gave it a bad haircut. It gives different textures. and the second, even more chopped up and beat up fan brush that gives me different kinds of textures. In addition to those two, the other two fun brushes I have are the house painter's brush that you get at your hardware store, and this gives a lot of different large swath kind of movements on the canvas, and a smaller one as well for grasses. Also, for applying the paint, I'll be using the palette knife. I like to use a triangular shaped palette knife, so I have the round edges at the very tip. Let's talk about the mediums. I will be using 4 different mediums on this painting. The first one is Olio Gel, which helps the fluidity of the paint. The second one is something called Olio Pasto. And the Olio Pasto thickens the paint. It makes it dry faster, and it also gives it a lot of body, so it'll dry in clumps and that you can work back into with the palette knife or other brushes. I will be using also Liquin for glazing. And finally, a mixture of Gamsol and Stand Oil mixed at 50-50 and shook up really well. This allows me to put the paint on, and it thins the paint out in a way that causes it to dry almost enamel-like, so it stays on the surface. And finally, for the fun part, let's squeeze some paint out onto the palette. So this is how I lay out my palette. It is organized on the color wheel, which is illustrated here. So the palette is going to mimic and repeat what is laid out in the color wheel. I start with my blacks over here. I have my transparent color, my glazing color here. And then I have my 2 whites, which I'll get to why I have 2 whites in a minute. Then I go through the yellow color spectrum, to the orange, to the red, to the browns. Then I hop over to the dark greens, blues, and purples. At the very edge over here on the left side, I have my supplementary colors, my high chroma greens, and a couple other colors that I'll be using towards the end of the painting. So let's get the colors out on the painting. I use as my darks is Indigo and Van Dyke Brown. Now, what I love about this Van Dyke Brown is that it is a perfect neutral. When you add white to it, it doesn't go into the blue part of the spectrum. It actually stays right in the neutral line when you mix it with white. Other blacks have a tendency to go much cooler and go towards blue. So I put a little bit of that down. And the other dark I use is Indigo. And the reason I use it is actually a darker value than the Van Dyke Brown. And it does have a bluishness to it. But that is good when I'm doing my dark areas because it gives, when I add a little bit of red in there, it gives it a purplish feel. Next, I have my transparent color. The only transparent color I'll be using for this painting is transparent orange. And I just put a little dab over here. Not much. I really don't have to use too much paint in the beginning, especially the transparent colors because they go a long way. Now, the 2 whites. I have a titanium white and I have a flake white replacement. I always start my paintings with the flake white replacement for a few reasons. One, it dries quicker than titanium and allows me to move on to later stages of the painting much easier. And you want to put plenty of white out because you'll be using that quite a bit. The titanium white I use in the later parts or the latter parts of the painting because it is a stronger white and it does dry slower, but it gives me a lot of the strong light effects, with the brilliant sun coming out from behind the mountains and things like that, that the flake white replacement doesn't let me have. Okay, let's get to the yellows. I have 2 kinds of yellows. Again, this yellow is a lemon yellow, and when mixed with other colors, it has a tendency to go towards the green part of the spectrum. I have a cadmium yellow deep, which is a yellow that when mixed with other colors has a tendency to move towards the orange part of the spectrum. So these 2 yellows allow me to go in both directions from the central part of the yellow part of the color wheel. All right, so put these guys out. Again, I find I don't have to put too much paint out on the palette because it this paint goes a long way if you use good quality paints. Now I have two more yellows. I don't call them pure yellows. They're yellows that are more neutralized and grayer. That's a Naples Yellow, which is light in value and very low chroma. And then I have also yellow ochre, which is a darker yellow that I can mix in with the darker oranges and reds without changing the value. Next, cadmium orange. Very powerful, strong color. Right there. The red I use is something called Fanchon red. Very fancy name. Basically, it's like a cadmium red. It is a very strong, highly chromatic red that can be used as accents and in the landscape. I'm not going to be putting that too much directly on the canvas without mixing it. Let's get to now the browns. I have actually used 4 different kinds of browns. This is the Venetian red, burnt sienna, raw umber, and asphaltium, which is likened to burnt umber, except the asphaltium is a little more chromatic, has more intensity of the color, and it doesn't tend to be so gray when I mix it with other colors. And it doesn't dry as flat and chalky as burnt umber does, and that's why I use the asphaltium. The Venetian red, when mixed with white, actually bends towards the red part of the spectrum. So it's going to bend towards the red. The burnt sienna, when mixed with white, is going to bend towards the orange part of the spectrum. So I know exactly if I'm mixing it, it's going to go towards the red, and the burnt sienna is going to be acting as or bending towards the orange part of the spectrum. So if I need to neutralize my blues, and subtly, I'll use the burnt sienna. The raw umber I use because it has a green feel to it. It's a brown that actually, when you mix it up, can have a green feel and a warm yellowy feel and distant mountains. So I keep that in my quiver over here in case I need it. Next, the asphaltium is my major brown. I'll put plenty of that out because I'll be using it all day. Now let's get to these greens. This is an olive green dark. I like this olive green dark because when put on transparently, it has a yellow, warm feel to it. And when just placed thickly and mixed thickly on the painting, it gives a good dark forest feel. The color itself just makes you feel like you're somewhere in the dark woods. Again, here I have 2 blues. The ultramarine blue will bend, when mixed, towards the purple part of the spectrum. The cobalt blue, when mixed, will bend towards the green part of the spectrum, or the color wheel. Now, why is this important? It's important because if you take ultramarine blue and you say, oh, I'm going to make some green, and you mix it with yellows, yeah, it'll go green, but it won't go as green or look as pure green as if you mix it with cobalt blue. It'll really go green. Same thing. Oh, I want to make some purples. Well, if you mix red with the cobalt blue, you'll get it purple, but it won't be as purple as if you mix it with the ultramarine blue. You'll really get some beautiful purples. And later you'll see in the mountains, I'm mixing the ultramarine blue with the Venetian red. What does that mean? A blue that bends towards purple with a red that bends with a brown that bends towards red. So it's a purplish blue. Finally, I have something called dioxazine purple. Try saying that 3 times. It's a beautiful purple. It works really well with the ultramarine, gives some dark purples, and it actually goes very well with the cadmium red or the Fanchon red for foreground work, as well as the burnt sienna. It really mixes good with the burnt sienna to give a warm foreground shadows if that's what you're going for. All right, that's the basic layout for now. Like I said, later the supplementary colors will be coming in, but I'll explain those when I get them onto the palette. So let's jump right into the butterfly system, which I created to help myself and other artists move through successive stages in a painting with confidence. Essentially, how do I approach a painting and a landscape and bring the two together? The landscape itself can be very complex, very complicated, and intimidating, both with the colors and the lighting and all the objects, trees, skies, you name it. Painting also can be intimidating because of the delicacy and intricacies of how to bring a painting together. Paint, color, all sorts of elements. For clarity, I separated the essential contents of what a painting is composed of on one side and the essential components of a landscape on the other. And in the middle, something in the techniques that can unify these two, actually two different worlds. So let's take a look at the system as how I present it on a dry erase board. On this side, we have the painting and the world of painting, which is composed by three elements: color, value, and drawing. Those are the three elements that I'm going to be discussing over and over as I do my demonstration. On the right side of the painting, we have the landscape, the world as we see it, nature. And there's only three elements in a landscape you have to concern yourself with: the light, the atmosphere, and the objects that you'll be painting. Everything on a painting is going to be a combination of these three in the landscape and a combination of these three in the theories and techniques of painting. Now, what brings these two elements together? Application. What is application? That is the tools, the mediums, and the paints you use to apply the paint to the canvas, to recreate the landscape on the painting. You can see I put idea or vision at the top. That's because all the elements of the painting, all the color, value, and drawing, and all the elements of the landscape, light, atmosphere, and objects, as well as how you apply it, are going to be determined by the idea or vision that you have of the painting itself. So in the hierarchy of a painting, the idea or the vision sits at the top, and it is the prime director of your decisions. So let's return now to the three elements of a painting: color, value, drawing. As you move through the painting, you will be making adjustments on all these three items. And when you make mistakes and you're correcting mistakes, your mistakes will be corrected in the drawing, in the value, or in the color, or a combination of those three. On the landscape side, as I'd said earlier, the landscape is very complex. There's so much information and lighting conditions and movement. So how do I simplify it? If you have in your mind, you're asking the question, what am I painting each moment? You're going to be looking or thinking about these three elements. I'm looking at a mountain. Okay. It's rainy. The atmosphere is very humid, or the atmosphere is dry. And the light is a setting sun, or the light is overhead. It's a sharp light. It's a dim light. So at any time when you're looking at a painting, or you're looking at your landscape to paint, you want to ask, what are the combination of these three elements? When you've realized what the combination of these three elements are, you're going to combine these three elements to recreate it through the application of the paint. Now the third item, the middle item, the application, which is like the bridge between these two worlds. The application is a combination of three different elements: the paint you use, the brushes or tools, palette knives, and any different kinds of mediums you may use, such as Olio Gel or linseed oil. The fourth aspect of this is the actual surface you're painting on, if it's a linen, if it's canvas, or if it is a gesso board. But after you've decided what surface you're painting on, the three major elements are going to be the painting tools, the paint, and the mediums. So this is how I apply the butterfly system to the landscape. You can also take this idea and you can apply it to the figure. When I paint figures, I apply the same idea. And when I paint still lifes, it's the same idea. It's just some of the other elements in figures and landscapes are diminished. For example, in painting the figure, the atmosphere isn't as complex. It's usually a very specific and clear atmosphere, as well as the light. The light is usually a very specific lighting if you're doing especially an indoor painting of a figure. As far as the painting that I'm going to be demonstrating, let me answer the questions on the landscape side. The light itself is going to be a setting sun. The atmosphere is going to be a semi-humid atmosphere, and the objects are going to range from clouds to mountains to water to trees, and I think that's about it. So that's what I'll be painting and considering the entire time I'm painting my demonstration: the light, the atmosphere, and the objects. There are only 3 items you're looking at in a landscape at all time. There is nothing else. Please keep this in mind, as it'll help you simplify everything you're looking at. Now, on the graphic that you see with the butterfly, you will see 2 other elements. You'll see light quality and composition. I put those on there because the light quality and composition are the 2 major elements, overall elements of the painting. The composition is like the structural element, and the light quality is I would call it the poetic revelation of all the items on the landscape. So all the decisions will be within a compositional system and a certain light quality. In order to fully explain the drawing value and color in the painting, I'm going to go to and reference the book I wrote, Landscapes in Oil, and walk through each 3 of these elements with you. So let's look at the 7 primary elements of drawing. The first element is the shape, the overall shape of the object you're drawing or painting. As you can see in these illustrations, the shape immediately tells the viewer what the object is. The second aspect is proportion. Proportion is the relative size distances between the different elements of an object. For example, the distance between your eyes to your nose and the nose to the mouth are the proportions. Also, the distance between the eyes and the overall shape of the head. The same applies for a tree. The distance or the length of the trunk is in proportion to the length of the boughs and all the other leafy aspects of the tree. The third element is perspective. And perspective is the creation of a 3-dimensional illusion on a 2-dimensional surface. In landscape painting, it is essential because it helps you create the distant mountains sitting miles away, and it also helps create objects that feel 3-dimensional sitting in that space. As you can see, the perspective here on a grid gives the illusion that the land masses are pushing back into a distant horizon and a specific vanishing point. Perspective also applies to the objects you're drawing, meaning if you're drawing a tree limb, you have to draw it in perspective. Same thing if you are drawing a rock or an outcropping, you have to draw it in perspective. The fourth element is what I call the structure or anatomy. Now, with the human figure, it's very obvious. You have to study the anatomy in order to draw the figure accurately. The same thing applies with nature. You have to know the structure or anatomy of a tree, of water, of mountains, of lakes, and all the other elements in a landscape. The fifth element is form. Form is created in a drawing by modeling light and darks or shading to create the illusion of a 3-dimensional object through value. The sixth element is materiality. Some people like to say texture, which is fine, but I think texture only refers to the outside aspects of an object. So I like to say the materiality. What does this mean? The materiality of water, it's how it's composed of the molecules and it's how it operates in nature, is different than the materiality of a rock, which is solid. That is a different materiality of a leaf or a tree or a mountainside. So when painting, you have to consider the materiality of the object you're painting, as that will affect on how you apply the paint. And last, but definitely not least, the seventh element of drawing, which is the character. Now, actually, the character is going to determine all the other elements at the beginning, but I put it last because people often try to get the tree to have so much character, but then the proportion and the structure and the anatomy and everything else falls apart. So all the other elements are underneath the character. The character of an object is its psychological effect on you, how it makes you feel. Is the tree a young tree? Is it a vibrant young tree? Or is the tree an old withered tree? Has it been beaten up by lightning? Is it bearing fruit? So the character of whatever you're painting includes the gesture and all the time and weathered elements of that object. This is essential to the psychological aspect you're creating in your painting. The reason is, if you paint a tree without any character, it looks like a tree. But if you really consider the life of the tree and the life of all trees, and the life and the meaning of tree. You may be able to paint a tree that just isn't a tree on the side of the hill. Perhaps it's the tree that Buddha sat under. Perhaps it reminds the viewer of the tree of life. So there's so many more different meanings you can put into your paintings if you're painting while considering the character of the objects. Those elements of the painting are tools for you to be in control the entire time when you're approaching the difficulties of your painting. Now let's talk about value. Value is the key to light and space in a painting. It's often said that value does all the work and color gets all the credit. Value is divided into 10 different elements. Dark black, all the way up to pure white. In the middle are all the grays. The majority of your painting, I would say 98% of your painting to 85%, are going to be within the middle grays of the painting. I'm going to be discussing compressed value ranges and expanded value ranges. When I say compressed value ranges, that means I'm working within 2 or 3 boxes of value here. Expanded value ranges means I'm working within 6 or 7 or 8 boxes. The sky in the painting that I'm going to be demonstrating is in a very compressed value range. The foreground is in a very expanded value range, from 2 all the way down to 9 or 10. That's the difference between a compressed value range and expanded value range. Now let's get to color, which I always refer to the goddess of painting. Color is broken into 3 different elements: hue, value, chroma. Hue is the color itself: green, red, purple, blue, orange. Value, we discussed. Chroma is the relative intensity of a color. Is it bright, bright candy apple red, or is it a muted, faded red on a couch, an old couch? Now, I know value is discussed as a separate element, and as artists, we have to artificially separate value from the other aspects to color, because it has played such an integral part of creating light and form. So whenever you're making color adjustments, you're going to make adjustments either in the value, the hue, or the chromatic intensity, or the chroma. Now, you've seen the color wheel perhaps before. I will say that the color wheel is a cross-section of a much larger 3-dimensional shape, like an egg. It's a color egg, actually. Let's look at the color wheel as we've known it. Red, blue, and yellow are your primary colors. Your secondary colors are orange, violet, and green, or orange, purple, and green. Now, in order to properly mix violet or oranges, you actually need 2 different kinds of reds. You need a red that will bend and mix towards the purples or violets, and you need a red that will bend and mix towards the oranges. Those are 2 different kinds of reds you'll need on your palette. Same thing with the blue. You need a blue like cobalt that will bend or mix easier towards green, or cerulean blue will go towards green, and then blues like ultramarine will move and mix easier towards the violets or the purples. Regarding yellow, lemon yellow mixes towards the green easier, and cadmium yellow mixes easier towards the orange. There's a system called the Munsell System that shows color in its 3-dimensional aspects, meaning hue, value, and chroma. The value is the middle column, the relative light or dark of any color. If you were to take any color and make a black and white photograph of it, you would be seeing its value. Then there's the hue. Is it blue? Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it orange? Is it red? That's the outer circle. Then there's the chroma, or intensity. Is it really strong blue, or is it more gray blue, more gray blue, more gray blue, more gray, until it's pure gray? Is it a very powerful bright blue, strong in chromatic intensity, or is it more gray, more gray, more gray, until eventually it's just the gray and the chroma has been taken out? Now, each color can be seen at a different value. That blue goes back out at a different value up here. This is another illustration of what I mentioned earlier as a gigantic color egg, 3-dimensional. You'll notice the center has the value again, and then outward it becomes more chromatic towards the red, or more chromatic towards the blue, or the green, or the yellow. So this, in any direction, when there's a color problem on your painting, you want to first locate, is it a value problem, Is it a hue problem? Which direction, blue, red? And then how chromatically intense am I going to create that color? So during the entire demonstration, I'm going to be referring back to drawing, value, and color and those elements. I'm sharing this with you so you can always have a confident position on how to resolve the difficulties you're going to find on your canvas. Remember, always go back to, is this a drawing problem? Is it a value problem? Is it a color problem? And please go in that order: drawing, value, color. The last thing I'd like to say is every time you put the brush to the canvas, you are applying drawing, value, and color. Every time. So be aware of those three elements. We just discussed the butterfly system and its essential components. I'm going to show you now how you can apply that to the very first stage of your painting. The components of the painting are drawing, value, and color. So on the first part of the painting, I'm going to be doing a grisaille, which is a fancy French word for painting in black and white, or painting in white and brown. All right? Okay, so now why am I doing that? Why am I doing a grisaille? Why not I just mixing all the colors and slapping them on the painting? For this reason. All the problems I'm going to encounter in this problem are going to be located in three different categories. There's going to be a problem with drawing, there's going to be a problem with value, and there's going to be a problem with the color. The grisaille portion of the painting, you're isolating two of those components. You're taking out color. And you're going to isolate the difficulties and the problems of the drawing of your painting and the value of your painting. In this way, you can get a good clarity in the beginning process, so later when you start adding color and textures and light effects, you're building off the foundation, and a very strong foundation of the drawing and value that you've set up in the grisaille. Okay, as I said, the grisaille is basically a combination of white and some other color. I'm using asphaltium and flake white replacement. So I'm going to do a mini value scale here, okay? So I have the pure white over here, and then I'll have slowly over to the darker brown, like that. So I'll have a mini value scale going from dark to white. Now, I will also add the indigo on the far, far, far left to give me that real dark punch that I need in the foreground. So I always like to mix piles up. That way there's no guesswork later. I can go directly to the pile I need to get the exact value that I want to apply onto the canvas. Okay? So there's a little bit there. All right, I'll use more of this asphaltium. There you go. Now, what's great about mixing with piles is that you'll be able to save all these piles on the side of the palette and then reintroduce them as you're doing the other colors during the painting. So there's no wasted effort or time in doing these. A lot of times people, they don't have the patience to go and make piles. They want to get the paint on the canvas. But the problem is, if you're not working from an organized value pile system, you're not sure what value you're putting on the canvas at any time. Okay? So there we go. I'll leave him here. And then a little less. There you go. Now I'll have to probably mix these piles a couple times, but that's all right. All right, it goes really quick. There we are. So I got white, light gray, dark gray, dark gray, and then super dark, and then dark black over there. Okay, now I'm going to go to the canvas, and I'm going to first do the drawing of the landscape, and then on top of the drawing, I'm going to put the value. Okay? And I'm going to keep making adjustments with the drawing until I get it pretty solid, and then I'll make adjustments with the value throughout the painting. All right. I'd like to always kind of get a sense of where the middle of my canvas is. So I always do that. Compositionally also, there's an idea of the rule of thirds, which is a third over here down is a good location for center of interest, and then a third down here, and then you go a third up, right, and then a third down. So you got like a little grid like that. And they say that this is a good location for your center of interest. Now, I don't like to use that as a hard rule. If this is a good location, it means it can be here, it can be here, it can be here, it can be here, because it depends on what the tension is from this center of interest and everything else on the canvas. So every object in the composition is creating points of tension in regards to your main focal point or your center of interest. Okay? So with this painting, even though this is the third here, I am going to put the center of interest slightly below it. Why? It's a setting sun. Psychologically, it's setting below the third. All right? When you see the reference photo for the grisaille that I have illustrated, that's the completion of the entire grisaille. What I'm going to show you now in the video is what happens with the drawing underneath that completed grisaille. Basically, I'm locating all my major shapes, all my large major shapes on the canvas. Okay? There we go. There's one. And it's very loose. You don't have to get all uptight about any kind of details. These are all to be adjusted later. Now, with drawing, as I had said in the system, the first stage of the drawing has to do with what kind of shapes you're laying out. What is the shape of the object I'm creating? It's like you want to make sure to get the circle or the oval of the head before you draw on eyelashes. Same thing with landscapes. You want to get the overall shape of the mountain and of the water, body of water, and all sorts of items that will be part of your composition. All right. And you'll see what I'm doing. I'm not just drawing the objects. I'm basically I'm doing triangles. There's a big triangle here. There's a little circle there. There's a square here. There's a long triangle here. You see that? Because you want to start with the essential forms of nature. There's a square. There's another rectangle. You want to start with the big essential forms. Okay? All right. Now, what have I established here in the drawing? I've established it with my horizon, my middle of my canvas here, but my horizon line is just below it. Okay? And I know there's the rule, you don't put the horizon line in the middle of the canvas. And what I love about rules is you can get to break them whenever you want. Okay? Now, the reason on this painting I can get away with it is because the horizon line is going to be obscured. It's not going to be like a line in the middle. It's going to be a suggested line. And the tensions of the mountains rising up and then the light shining down is going to be pulling off that line, that invisible line of the horizon. So between the tension of all these dynamic aspects of the painting, I need a steady, like metronome. I need a steady point, and that's going to be the invisible horizon line. Okay? Good. Now here, that's where the light's going. All right. Now, even with the drawing, I'm going to start being aware of the value of the lines themselves, because I know later that line's going to disappear quite a bit. All right. And now we have cloud banks. They're coming across here. Cloud banks. And then here we got larger clouds that are streaming in from the top. All right. There. This is the light. This is the tree that's going to be popping up over there. This is the water. Okay, so this is the drawing. This is the drawing phase. It's very loose, and it gives me enough that I can now go into the major shapes of the value. Okay, let's get into the value portion of the painting. The second aspect of in the butterfly system of what the painting is composed of. Now, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to set up different value zones on the canvas. So this is going to be one specific block of a value, a different block, different block, different block, different block. Okay? Now, the rule of thumb is this. The closer to the sun, the lighter it's going to be. The lower the value, meaning white. The further from the sun, the darker it's going to get. Okay? The second rule of thumb is that you have to be very aware of your compression of values and your contrast. What does that mean? When you have something that's really dark and really white, that's high contrast, and it's a really expanded value system. When you have something that's really white next to something that's a little darker, that's a compressed value range. The closer to the sun, the more the compressed value range is going to be. All right, so I'm going to be working here in the middle of the value range towards darker for this back mountain. Now I am using a little bit of the Gamsol to mix with this because I want this to dry relatively quickly. All right. There's the top of the mountain. And there we go. Now as I get closer towards the light source, which is there, I'm going to be using a slightly lighter value of the paint until I get really close and it gets extremely light. Now, what you're seeing here, I love this. This is like magic. This is complete magic. It always fascinates me. Here with this simple value string that I've placed on the palette here, I've already been able to get a sense of light coming across a mountain. I always find that to be phenomenal. Here you have like your piano keys, and you've just created a scale of light. All right, so here we go. This guy comes down here. Again, a little darker than up there. All right. All right, now we're going to put... Now the value I'm putting up here is similar to right about there. The sky, for the most part, usually isn't as dark as the shady areas of the landscape. However, in this particular painting, since it is a sunset, I need to really have a lot of punch right here and have the sense that light is radiating across the entire canvas. Because of that reason, the value of my sky has to be relatively dark. And then the clouds that I paint on top of that sky are going to be lighter and show more of the light effect hitting the objects. So here we go again. Case in point about value, and that this is focused primarily on value. If you see what I just did here, I just created, I'm going to finish it. I just created an entire another value scale. Okay? If you look at the reference of the value scale that's up, you will see what you see on my palette, which is a white to dark, white to black. Well, I'm essentially recreating that entire value scale with different objects on the grisaille. There you go, a white to dark, a white to dark. And I'm going to do the same thing here now. A light white to dark, white to dark, and then dark away here. So the overall will be a white to a dark. So the value scale, in a way you can always paint your grisaille and feel like you are certain of what you're doing. You're remembering in your mind from the system that you're essentially painting value scales going in different directions. All right. All right. I'm going to leave the area where the sun is pretty light by wiping it out. Okay. And the sky, when you're putting in your grisaille in your sky, be as sloppy as all. Just be sloppy, because all that, I'll teach you a little trick here. Look, you can put in suggestions of clouds without even putting a brush to the canvas. So you want to keep it nice and sloppy, and you never know what'll creep up. You know, look at that. Ooh, you know, fun stuff. All right? There you go. Now, again, here's another value scale. Lighter, darker, darker, darker. All right, so we have our mountains in the background. They're not even that dark. They're lighter than that. There. Mountains in the far background. Then I got this first set of hills. A little darker, just a little tiny darker than that. That edge is wrong. See, there's the mistake. There's a mistake. I have the light source here, so everything needs to go from light to dark. But in this mountain, I just did dark to light. And that's going to throw everything off. That's a mistake. All right, not a problem. I'm going to obliterate that area and go back in, make it slightly lighter with the white. And then I'm going to go light. Now, you see, it's fixed. But that's the kind of mistakes you want to make now in the grisaille portion. That way later, when you're putting color and you're having textures and mountains and rocks, you're not trying to fix it at that time. Or what's worse is if you left it, you'll paint a mistake on top of a mistake on top of a mistake, and then you're in a bad part of the town. You're in a no bueno part of town. All right, now I'm working down the value scale darker and darker. All right, this guy will be like this dark. All right, and then I'll just keep working my way across. Or this guy meaning this mountain, is about that dark. And then this mountain at the very end has extreme dark accents. Okay? And then it goes to the middle values. All right, now let me see little adjustments here. Little adjustment. I do want there. This guy right here. There we go. All right, now you'll see. Let me clear that out. Let's get the basic value of the water. Other point, when you're painting value zones, here, 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 you are painting the middle value of that area. Very important. Why? Why am I painting the middle value of that area? For this reason. If you look at the palette here, I'm painting this value of that general area. I do that because I go from the center out. If I need to add shadows, I have room to go this direction. If I want to add highlights, I go that direction. So when you paint the middle, you can always go in either direction. If I paint the highlights, then I got to go darker, then find the middle values, and then find the darker values. And I find that to be much more difficult because what happens is if I paint all the areas with the lighter values and I go to the area next to it, if that's off a little, I can't adjust it as easily. But if they're all painted in the middle here, I can adjust different areas in relationship to the middle value of every area. All right. Also, if I go really with the highlights, I find that it doesn't allow me enough space in the value scale to add accents because I've gone too far. If I paint with the darks in the area, the pure darks, same problem happens. The painting tends to be too dark overall. So I'm going to put some GAMS on that area and wipe out some more. You see, whoop, look at that. So again, there's two parts that I'm working on. I'm working on the drawing and I'm working on the value. I'm working on the value on top of the drawing. Good? All right. In this whole grisaille, what I am addressing is the three aspects of the landscape. Again, this is from the butterfly system. The three aspects of the landscape are light, atmosphere, and objects. So in the value alone, in creating a value painting or a grisaille, I can address the foundation of how the light effect is, what the atmospheric conditions are of the landscape, and how that light and atmosphere is revealing the objects in the landscape. All right, let's get to the water, the value of the water. I'm just gonna. Notice the direction I'm applying the paint. This is in the middle portion of the system, because how you apply your paint affects how a viewer sees the painting, how it affects how their mind processes the landscape. If I go like this and I'm doing water, wait a minute, that doesn't look like water, that looks like trees. And the difference was how I applied the paint, the direction. I applied it vertically rather than horizontally. Whereas if I go like this and I'm applying the paint horizontally in horizontal strokes, psychologically our mind already registers that as some kind of surface, some kind of flat surface. And in the context of this landscape, it's the flat surface of the water. Okay? So how you apply the paint, even the direction in which you're applying it, is important. Because remember, the application of the paint is what bridges the world of the painting with the world of nature. Very important. Currently, I'm using using Gamsol pretty generously. I'm not worried about putting any real thick paint on the canvas. All right, I've reached my foreground. Now I know, actually, I haven't reached the foreground. Let me soften this transition here. There. And soften this transition. So as I'm softening these transitions, I'll go to, again, how you treat your edges is so important. I like to call them transitions. So how the mountain transitions to the water, how the mountain transitions to the sky, or the edge, is very important. You don't want anything pretty much on your canvas to be a cutout, unintentionally a cutout, meaning like a cookie cutout. Or you can save those moments for when you want the eye to go directly there. So later in this painting, there's going to be a harsher edge right there. You see that? That's a very intentional use of an edge, all right? Because that is going to contrast against the spilling of the light in front of this area. So this edge, or this transition, I'm intentionally keeping sharp. This edge, I'm intentionally keeping soft. This edge is soft. This edge is sharp. This edge is very soft because of the values, all right? Now for the front of the painting. I'm going to go all the way to the dark areas and get my foreground darken. And this is where it's really obvious. This is where you're like peeking behind the curtain and you're seeing the little magician back there, the guy behind the curtain in the Land of Oz, where he says, "Don't look back here." Well, you're looking back there now because I just set up an entire value scale on the painting. All right, there you go. That is the foundation of the painting, this value scale. And of course the drawing. All right, good. So can you see, imagine in your mind the value scale that's referenced, white, darker grays, darker grays, darker grays, darker grays, till you get to black. Now, I know we have this middle section because this is a landscape. This isn't just a pure value scale. All right? Now, let's talk about the foreground. Why am I not putting the lights in here? I'm not putting the lights. That's the middle value of the foreground. I'm not putting the lights because I really need to set up a fence or a wall. This is 2 feet from me. That is 5 miles. That is 93 million miles, or billion. I don't know how far is the sun, but it's a long ways away. The only language we have in painting to tell me this is 2 feet. That's a half a mile, that's 5 miles, that's a billion miles. The only language we have is value. And drawing, but mostly value sets that up. And there's this wonderful saying in painting regarding value. It says, value does all the work and color gets all the credit. One more thing before we move on. You're going to see that there's the light source here is shining on these mountains, and that there's this light streak that comes out, because the light, when I was painting it, was behind this ridge of the mountain, and it caused this light ray to come out over here. I'm going to do that with value, and quite simply, I'm going to put a dividing line here between here and other areas. And I just, below that line, I make it slightly darker. Okay? This is how the atmosphere is affecting the light in this area. So you're going to see, again, now I'm addressing what is in the landscape, the light and the atmosphere. All right? You see, light, atmosphere. And as it goes further away from the sun, that streak gets slightly darker in front of the landscape. All right? So once again, I have a mini value scale I just created. Light, darker, darker. Just like that. And that's going to create this light effect of the sun revealing this area and the bottom area below that being in shadow. Let me get to it here. There we are. There's the grisaille. So now I have that with the light effect. The last portion of this grisaille has to include that guy. Let's go back to edges. I want to soften this edge, by the way, after I put it in. I don't want it to be too harsh. Especially because otherwise it'll just take over the whole painting and it'll look like a cutout. So again, back to the edges, I'm softening that edge right there. All right. Every element in the painting is part of the theater of the landscape. I like to see it as this entire painting is a large theatrical play being put on. And there's different characters. You have to decide who your main character is. In this painting, the sun is the main character, and everything else is supporting and secondary characters, okay? So that's the main character, and then this is the supporting character, supporting. Now I've completed the grisaille phase of this painting. This is a reference for me to keep continuing on a larger painting. In a moment, I'll put up a larger grisaille that is the painting I will be applying the color to and the textures of the landscape. So this is the larger grisaille that I prepared for this video. And you can see, again, the light structure, the light scale is set up from light to dark, light to dark, light to dark. Now, before I get into it, I have to do something called oiling out, because what happens is painting, the paint's dry and everything gets sunk in and you lose your actual values that you're working on. All right, so I'm just wetting it up here so I can see the actual value of each area that I'll be working with. And you can do this with mixture of Gamsol and linseed oil, which is what I'm doing here now. Or you can do some retouch varnish. It's your call. Also, walnut oil is really good because walnut oil doesn't yellow over time. It stays pretty true. All right. There. Now I have a much more realistic, or accurate, I should say, representation of the values on this painting. And it is the perfect time to take a break. So while you're painting, you always want to be able to say, okay, put it down, take a breather, catch your breath, and then go back to it with fresh eyes. Me, I like to do magic when I take my breaks. So let's get to it. So the reason I like to do magic or music during my breaks is because they have a lot of parallels to painting. In painting, we're creating one big illusion. We're making the illusion that paint and linen are landscapes and lights and rocks and mountains. And in magic, we're creating a different kind of illusion where anything can be transformed into anything else. So I like to do magic with some ordinary objects, all right? So just going to get out some money, and then we'll go from there. Is that good?
Cool.
All right, good. So basically, oh, sorry. It's my anti-theft device, you know. I live in New York City. You need it. All right. So here we go. I got $5. 1, 2, 3, 4, $5. Now, yes, you can touch them. You can feel them. You can smell them. For some reason, people smell money. You know, they have to make sure it's real. Yeah, real dollar. All right. Now, notice my sleeves are rolled up. Okay.
Right.
Now, this is no CGI. This is no clever editing. No smoke and mirrors. I'll take the $5, and what I want you really to focus on now are the hundreds. All right, and I mean, you know, Benji hundreds, 100, 200, 300, 400, $500. Look.
That is a $100 bill right in front of my eyes,
There
and I
you
have
go.
no idea how that
Now-
just happened. Can you turn it back to a $1 bill?
Ooh. That's the problem with these tricks. You can't go backwards. But I tell you what, we'll try it. We'll try it. Just put it together. This time, really keep your eyes on the money, though.
All right.
See, you were
All
looking
right.
at me, and then it gets all screwed up. You don't look right at the money because the
How
dollar.
did that even happen?
Because you see, the dollars come right back.
All right, I quit my job.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I took a break, did a little magic, relaxed. I come back to the painting with some fresh eyes. I cleaned my palette, and I always like to go back to my painting with inspiration. And so I have a quote for you from Thomas Cole. "The sky is the soul of all scenery. It makes the earth lovely at sunset and splendid at sunrise. In the one, it breathes over the earth a crystal-like ether. In the other, a liquid gold." I like to constantly inspire myself as I paint, either with quotes, music, or looking at other paintings to keep my spirits up, because I know it's very difficult to paint and not feel like, this is not going good. So particularly with the painting, every decision in the painting is according to the system that I'm presenting. All the decisions in this painting are made from the idea or the vision of the painting. So how it's drawn, how it's what the color scheme is, what the value scale is, it's all determined by the idea or the vision. So in reading a little Thomas Cole, it helps me remind me the idea behind this painting itself, and that will inform my decisions. I'm a big proponent of mixing piles, as I said earlier in the grisaille phase. That way, at the beginning, I do all my heavy lifting. I do all my hard work of getting everything set up. I like to see it as if you're a pianist and you sit down to play the piano, and imagine if all the keys weren't playing the notes you expected, but they just played random notes. That'd be really difficult to perform. So when I paint, I like to mix my piles, and those are like the different notes on the keyboard. And I can go to any note I want at any time. I can modulate it, whatever I need. So there you go. Those are the light. That's the light area of the painting. I often like to start with the lightest area of the sky because if I do the other painting and then I go try to get to the light, the dirtiness of the other parts of the sky might mix into my light area. So I stay away from that. All right. I know this blast of color seems so strange and weird on top of the chalky grisaille, but that's because we're adding a whole set of chroma to a black or a gray scaled study. So what's happening here? You have the drawing, we have the value, now I'm adding the color. How do I add the color onto the value? I mix the color and make sure that the color I'm applying is the same value that's been placed underneath on this portion of the painting, on the grisaille. How do I do that? I squint. And I remember for years, everyone said, go ahead and squint and look. And I was like, why are we all squinting? What's going on? Why is everybody squinting? And I realized finally I'm squinting because squinting removes the details and it actually removes the chroma from the color of the things you're looking at. So when I squint and I look at the canvas here, I squint, I don't see the yellow so strong, but I do see that the yellow matches the value of the grisaille underneath. Okay, so that is what you're going to do. You're going to try to match the painting of the color with the grisaille that's underneath. All right, and you do that after you apply it, you squint. All right, now let's get to some color dynamics. I'm going to be going from yellowish white, mostly white here, a yellowish white to a grayish blue to a blue in the sky, and then the clouds are going to be over that. Now, there's a problem, and the problem is this. If you go in the color scale, or the color chart, if you go from yellow to blue, what do you get? Green. And, well, I can't paint a green sky. That would look weird. So how do I get from this yellow to blue without making everything look green and weird? So let me help illustrate to you with the color wheel how I'm going to go from yellow to blue without having the sky turn green. If you look at the color wheel, you have a yellow here, and if I want to go to blue, I have to go through the green. He's like the gatekeeper. So how do I get to here without making my sky go green? The idea is to go around the green like this, towards the blue. And you go up into the grays. Now, how is this going to look like a sky blue? Well, the neutral to yellow is purple or violet. If you mix these two together, yellow goes more towards the gray. It doesn't go directly straight gray. It bends in different directions. But with the violet or the purple that I'm using, it's of the same value as this. So it's going to make this yellow go in this direction. It's going to look very gray on the palette, but when I put it on the canvas, it's going to turn to a blue. And then I'm going to slowly go towards the blue on this side. Okay, so the second thing to always remember, that color is made of hue, value, and chroma. I just spoke about how to bend the hue, which is yellow, to the hue of blue. The chroma I also addressed, because by going towards the gray, the chroma is going to drop. So the third aspect of color, the value of yellow, is going to start here. As it goes to the gray, when I mix it with the purple, it's going to go here, and then the blue is going to be here. That means I have to mix a purple that is a value in this range with the yellow. And then I mix a blue that's in this range with the purple. So the yellow will be moving from here to a darker violet gray to a blue. And that's the movement of the value of that color in the sky. Again, the sun is here. Sky furthering away from the sun. There's a streak. Oop. You see? Right there. That was the mistake. What was the mistake? Let's look inside. In color, you have three aspects to color like I spoke about in the butterfly system. There's hue, value, and chroma. Value is the most important. So the value is correct. The hue is correct. It's yellow. But the chroma is too high. So the intensity or the chroma of that yellow streak is way too high for its location in the scheme of the painting. So how do I fix that? I locate the problem. The chroma is too intense. I have to lower the chroma, keep the same value. And that is the way I approach all my paintings with this system, which always allows me to systematically locate the problem and resolve the problem on the painting out of the aspects that are laid out on the butterfly chart. Okay, there we go. Okay, now this first pass of color, you're going to see is very thin, it's very loose, it's very light. And that's all good because I have plenty of time to really thicken up the paint. Now I just did a thin wash of the yellow over that cloud bank, which gives a subtle change in the value. Okay, but those clouds are 200 miles away, so they better be light. This is the one of the supplementary colors I'm using, a purple. It's a bluish lavender purple. It's very light in value, and that's why I chose it. That's why I chose to use it with my skies, because it doesn't darken my yellows. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another color string where I go from this yellow that's in the sky to the blue that everyone's going to think is a blue, but it's actually a gray. And you'll see it happen right here on the palette. There, you notice two things just happened. The yellow got darker, and the color, the hue, went towards a gray. All right? And I got a third pile here. Now, I do know that this is too dark. It's too much of a jump. So I got to lighten it up just a little. Good? You see the sky? There we go. Let's put that onto the canvas. Now, obviously, there's a transition between these two that I'm mixing as I go. There, you see? Now, you see how yellow or how blue that looks? It's not blue. It's gray. But the eyes, color is really, she's a mystery. Color is so wild. She can do what she wants, and you have to kind of work within her rules and her laws. And once you understand how she speaks, you can use her aspects to your advantage to help you create the paintings you need and have the accents and other accents and flourishes that you want on your paintings. Okay? Now, this is what I call the first pass of color on a painting. It sets up the different hues and values in the different areas of the painting. I do not get too worried about high chromatic intensity of my colors at this time. It's not important. Chroma, the third aspect of color, chroma comes, it builds as the painting proceeds. You don't have to shove it in the very beginning. Okay? In a way, the way this process proceeds, it's as if you were looking at a black and white TV show, like Twilight Zone, and it slowly started getting color. Slowly started getting color on your screen. That's what this is like. I want to keep it kind of neutral, and then as the painting progresses, it gets towards higher and higher Technicolor. All right. There, see? Now, that's the blue, but it's not blue. That's purple. And this is the gray. I want to make sure to have plenty of that gray in here. And I have the yellow here. I'll put the yellow back in. Like that. Okay? And also what I'll do is I'll put a touch of that there. Just clean the brush. All right, there we go. Let's get the clouds going now. I'm going to work over here. I like to work mostly from left to right on a painting after I get this area in because I'm right-handed and I'm going to be, if I paint this direction, I'm going to be smushing everything. If I go this direction, I at least have half a chance to not be eating paint during lunch because it'll be all over my hands. Here we go. So to make a purple, I take the ultramarine blue. I wouldn't say purple, but purplish. Take the ultramarine blue. I mix it with the Venetian red, and that's going to give me this dark purplish color. Now, see, that's a super dark purple. It's way too dark for my sky, but I just want to get those guys together. Now I know also, since that's way too dark, I need to neutralize a little bit with the complementary color burnt sienna. There we go. And the whole sky itself has an orangey feel to it. All right. So it's going to be orangish purple, and then more orangey, and then yellow as you get closer to the sun. Now I'm going to lighten that up. And there's a nice gray. So here's a darkish purple, kind of neutralized by the burnt sienna. It's still way too dark. I'm going to lighten it up. There we are. And it really needs to be much warmer. Okay. I'm actually going to put a little bit of orange in there. Speaking of orange and warmer. There we go. Okay. All done. Clean the brush. Actually, I'm going to use a different brush. This is the filbert brush. It's well used. It's kind of scruffy. All right. There. Now, as I move closer to this area over here, it's going to be going from, you see how the value matches the color, or the color I'm applying matches the value. As I move closer to the sun, this is all going to get more yellow and orangey. It's kind of purplish over here. I added some of that purple and a little bit of cobalt to make it feel a little purplish as it's far back behind the sun. It is a little too dark. I'll lighten it up. There we are. All right, so now continuing this string of color, because now earlier I created a string of value. Now I'm going to create a string of color and value. This is going to be getting warmer and oranger, purple, more purplish and less neutralized as I go towards the sun. Make another pile. There we go. So you see the purple in there, but it's a very neutral grade purple. And the value just changed. There's darker and there's lighter, right? And you'll see as I go this direction, I'm going to get lighter and more oranger. That way I'm controlling my color through hue, value, and chroma. Right now the chroma isn't changing much. It's pretty much still in the grays, but the value is changing and the hue is changing. Trying to see how it looks like when I get it here. All right. There we go. All right, here we go. I'm going to take a section of that pile, scoot it over to here. I'm going to make it more orange. And lighten it up. See, with the yellow I just put in, that was yellow ochre. I just lightened the value of the color, and I just made it more yellow. but I want it to go orange. And it needs to go a little lighter. Naples Yellow. I know it's very subtle, the value changes, but they're there. Trust me. I just adjusted the chroma there. I needed to really get much more orange in this area. And then as I move more this direction, lighter and oranger that way as I get closer to the light source over here. Now this is going to be too chromatic and too dark. Definitely too chromatic, so I'm going to lighten it up. There we go. And also, probably needs to be more towards the red. And it needs to be grayer, so I'm going to put that purple in, which is found in our sky. And we'll see how this looks. Again, this is a big jump between here and here now. There we go. Look at that. That's what you want. Darker value up top, darker value, lighter value in the bottom. I love this. This is what's so exciting about painting, is that you get these little things, these little subtle changes in value and color and chroma and hue, and then all of a sudden you get this sense of the light's just blasting onto the underbelly of these clouds. And it's amazing because it's just paint, it's paint. But it already looks like these gigantic lumbering clouds slowly making their way across the sky in the evening, you know. It's pretty cool. All right, now to get down to this cloud bank, which is further away and closer to the sun. So the further away, it means the value has to drop compared to this, and it's closer to the sun, which means it's going to be going more orange. So I take that pile I just had, I add in the orange. I also add a little bit of the transparent orange in there, just a dab. And I got to make this really lose a lot of value. It's got to go down. It's got to go lighter. So I'm going to go here, like that. And hope you guys can see on the palette. This guy's pretty much destroyed, but you see I went from dark clouds to middle, lighter clouds to light clouds to foreground clouds. Now I'm not foreground, but closer to the sun clouds, and now I'm really getting close to the sun here. And even in here is going to have a value range. That's going to be further from the sun, and this is going to be closer to the sun, which means the value's got to drop. I mean, the value's got to get lighter. All right, let's see how that looks. Like a game I love to play is when I'm mixing my colors, I love to try to nail the value and then go to the canvas and see if I nailed it. And look, boom! Ha! I love that. It's like hitting a jump shot from a 3-point line. So there we go. So I'm going closer to the sun. So these values are going to be getting lighter and lighter. You see that? That's so much fun. I'm going to take a little bit from my yellow over here and really washed out, soften my edges over here. Like that. Okay, so I'm going away now. I'm going back over on this direction. I'm going to darken it up. I'm actually going to gray it up a little bit. Like that. Get some of that purplish gray back in here. Like that. And then down here. Too light, too dark right there. Boom. Where's the problem? What's the problem? The value's wrong. How do you fix it? You fix the value of the color. So I just add that yellowish white in there. That'll help me out. All right. So that's the beginning of the sky.
The beauty of landscape painting is an American tradition. rooted in the Hudson River School painters who brought majestic landscapes to America through their paintings over 100 years ago. Artists like Frederick Church, Thomas Cole, Asher B. Durand, and others made up this movement, and since then, American artists have tried to master the drama and light of these techniques. One artist who has worked to master these techniques as part of the coveted Hudson River Fellowship is talented magician, mentalist, artist, and fellowship instructor Ken Salaz. In this instructional video, Ken, who was named as a living master by the Art Renewal Center in 2018, is going to show you how to paint magical landscapes like the Hudson River School painters did. Follow along with Ken as he shares his love of landscapes and answers the one question he is most often asked by his students. How do you take the complexity of nature, the changing light conditions, the movement, and all the elements, and make a painting that is cohesive and filled with poetry and meaning? To help his students and you to really grasp the concepts, Ken has created the butterfly system, taking 3 elements that are in the landscape, in reality, and the 3 elements of painting, and bringing them together in the middle with specific techniques and application.
Here with this, the way the lighting is in the studio, you see the shadow of the brush on the canvas? Well, that's actually the shadow that's cast by that light source.
You'll always know how to move your painting forward rather than getting stuck in repetitive mistakes. You will genuinely appreciate Ken's casual and encouraging teaching style. His skills as an entertainer shine through, making it easy and fun to learn from him.
Although Dante's talking about much larger things, I really can see this apply to color. Pure essence and pure matter, and the two joined into one, were shot forth without flaw, like 3 bright arrows from a 3-stringed bow.
Available on DVD or on digital to watch on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. Order your copy of Majestic Landscapes with Ken Salaz today.
The full video of Majestic Landscapes with Ken Salaz is 11 hours and 33 minutes. You get more painting depth than you could probably get in any local art lesson. Opportunity for you. You can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Ken lived a very interesting life, tried some very interesting things, including becoming a street magician. You'll learn more about that in this interview with Ken. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. Today I'm with Ken Salaz. Ken, welcome.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm so glad to have you here. I'm honored to have you in the studio.
I appreciate you having me. It's really great to be here.
So I want to kind of get into your head a little bit today because you're actually probably going to get into my head.
Your head, right?
Probably what that's all about. But Ken is not only a professional painter and a rock star painter and author, but also a magician and mentalist. So this is going to be one of the more interesting interviews I've ever done. So how did this whole art thing happen for you? How did you begin painting?
When I was a child, mostly grew up in Arizona in the deserts. My father's side's Native American. Mm-hmm. We lived right near the reservation. So my grandparents would take me on these long walks, mostly at sunset. And I was just so struck by the beauty of the sun, the clouds, the rocks. And around age 8, I started doing all these watercolors. Yeah. And I thought, at a very young age, I thought, wow, this is magic. To be able to capture something so beautiful and so fleeting and make it permanent. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is amazing. So.
Now, is that your grandparents are Native American?
Mm-hmm. They're Yaqui.
Yaqui is the tribe?
That's the tribe, yeah.
All right. So how was painting perceived in that culture? Any different than it would be any other culture? I mean, would it be honored more or less? Is it just kind of the same?
I thought, it was probably the same. I'd say it was the same. But always encouraged. Mm-hmm. It was always very highly encouraged to follow the painting the arts, and all the arts actually. Yeah.
So you started doing some watercolors. What happened then?
Then I really got into drawing. Mm-hmm. Pencil pad paper.
Right.
Because I realized with the watercolors, it looked off, and I thought, wow, when I draw it accurately, or more accurately, it looks better. So then I took away the watercolor and I just started drawing for years, just tons of drawings,
So did you have any additional art influences in your family? Did you have exposure to any actual art?
That's funny. It's funny. I didn't. We grew up, rather poor. We didn't travel much. We didn't go to, Paris or see any museums. And this was in the early 70s. Spent 5 years there. My first 5 years were in Mexico. We went down there. And so I wasn't around too much art, except for one art piece. And it hung above on the wall of my grandmother's house. And it was this old stove, wood stove, drawing of it in charcoal. And I loved it. Loved the feeling of it. It was a still life. And then I got older, and I said to my grandmother, "Can I have it?" And she said, "You have to ask your dad." I said, "That's Dad's?" She says, "Oh, when he was a little boy, he always dreamed of being an artist."
So your dad did that?
My dad loved to paint, to draw, but like I said, they were extremely poor. So he went to college and then became a doctor. So he put the art on hold because he wanted to make a living, And so when I said I was going to be an artist, he said, "Thank God, I love it. Go do it.
That's great.
Go do it, son. Go be the best artist." You
don't hear that very much. Usually the story is that I wasn't encouraged by my family members when, when I said I wanted to become an artist, they said, "Well, go become a doctor."
Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh, no. But my dad still does say, "You could have been a surgeon, with those hands that you do with the magic, in your mind, you could have been a surgeon." But he's happy. He's happy at it. And my mom was very encouraging always as well.
So did you end up going to art school? What happened then?
Yes, I did. I had a great art teacher in high school, Miss Mackey, and she bent all the rules. So she worked it out so I could go do figure drawing at the college for half a day while I was still in high school.
Fabulous. What college was that?
It was at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. So that's what my first experience of drawing the figure, which I loved. Then I went to Carnegie Mellon for a year. I got a scholarship to go there for the first year. And then I applied to Cooper Union in New York City, and I got a full scholarship at Cooper Union for 4 years, which was a dream come true, because going into art, you're not going to think you're making much money. I graduated, traveled around the world, which is a whole experience, Eric, I could tell you about.
Well, we have plenty of time.
Oh, well, I'll just, to condense it a little, I basically took a deck of cards, a guitar, and a sketch pad. And I would go to a town, and I'd go to the museums, I'd sketch, draw from all the masters' works, and I'd go out on the street, and I'd set up my guitar case, and I'd play, and I'd busk on the street and sing songs and make some money. In Paris, the rule was you make enough money to buy a crepe. One,
right.
That's when you take your break. And then you buy a bottle of wine. So then I would do that. And then after my voice got tired, I'd take out the deck of cards and I'd start, entertaining people. Well, that got interesting because there's always these gypsies all over Europe, and they would always try to run by and take the money out of my guitar case.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They're adorable. The kids are so adorable. But then if you turn your back, they take the money. So I'd take the case. I'd start doing card tricks for them, which really blew their mind, And so then they'd say, "Oh, here, let me show you this." And then they start trying to pickpocket me. And I said, wait, hold. I said, "I'll teach you a card trick. You teach me pickpocketing."
Yeah?
Yeah. And I could speak some French, And they said, okay. So they showed me, okay, this is how you do a watch. This is how you steal a watch. This is how we do the wallets, And, of course, people singing on the street, we just run by and grab the money. So I learned from different people as I was traveling, various nefarious arts. But, I do it just for entertainment now.
Yeah, well, so were you stealing for a living back then?
No.
Didn't think so.
I would watch them. They'd say, "This is how we do it." And, they would say, "Oh, you see that guy over there? His wallet's like this. We're going to go do that," And but I said, "Well, no, show me how to do a watch."
Right.
And I showed you earlier how I do the watch,
right.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it's happening to you.
No, you don't. No. So I know I've never stole for a living. I always do it for entertainment. And as I said, I used to practice on the subway in New York City between stops stealing people's watches.
So this magic thing, when did that start happening? This card tricks.
8. Like everything started when I was 8.
Yeah.
Everything 7. I was 7 when I really started drawing a lot. I got an earache. I had to stay home from school, and I started I'm going to draw all day. And then 8 years old, I started doing the magic. And both, there's the same reason I got into both of them. Around age 7, 8, I wasn't the best student in school. I was okay. But I really found it hard to answer the questions in the way that they wanted me to answer them.
Right.
Like, this is how you do it. And I was like, okay. So what I loved about painting and magic is that you imagine something, and then you find your own solution to get there. And it's the same as, I'm a businessman, I run my business. It's the same thing. You imagine what you want your business to be, and then you find your own solution to create it.
Right, right.
Well, every magic trick starts with what's impossible. What would be crazy and impossible? And that's what you're going to do, and then you find your way there.
So you're inventing your own tricks.
Yes, yes.
But when you were learning, how did you learn?
I read books. I read straight out of the books. I said, Mom, teach me how to, can we buy some magic tricks? She's like, $5 is all we have. I said, okay, let's go to the library. And I came down with a big stack of books. And I just read every book. And it was the old school. There was no like videos or anything. You had to look at each page and hold the card like this and then do that. And, it was like one illustration at a time.
Right.
And that's how I learned a lot of drawing as well, though. My mom would get these little books from the library on how to draw Mickey Mouse, and then how to draw, how to draw trees.
Well, it's interesting that to see that you were really interested in digging in and finding out exactly how to learn things, and it seems like you never gave up. You just kept perfecting it and going further and further, and you figured out a couple of things, 3 things that you could make a living from pretty quickly, at least to eat, right?
Right.
So you toured Europe for how long?
Toured Europe. It was about a year in Europe.
And what age were you at the time?
I was 21. I was 20. When I was 20, I went for 4 months into Central and South America. Then when I was 21, I went to Europe for a year, and then I went back to South America for another year and a half. So then I returned to New York when I was 24.
And you supported yourself the whole time?
The whole time.
And all doing street stuff?
Street magic, street music, and that was it, magic, music. And I drew the whole time. And I had a gallery. I would do these drawings, and I would mail and ship the drawings back to this gallery in West Virginia and make some money there. But when you play on the street, then the nightclubs would come and say, "Hey, we have a cafe. Can you come play Friday night?" So I'd play Friday night, and And if you have a guitar, you always have a place to stay.
Yeah.
You always have a place to stay if you have a guitar. People love to have a musician around, and
Sure.
I was on a boat in Greece, and I'm playing, and the guy walks up and says, "Oh, I'll teach you how to play that better." I was like, "Please." And I was like, "Hey," his name was Steinar. He lived in Norway.
Yeah.
And he said, "If you're ever in Norway, you can stay with us. Here's my address." And he says, "Please come stay with us." So a month later, I showed up at his door. He's like, "Hey, come on in." And I stayed at their house for 2 weeks and did portraits of them and played guitar and did magic.
So what would your recommendation be to your own kids about that? If your kid said, "I want to go do that very thing," would you let them do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you follow what you love, and you are always interested in learning more about what you love, you're going to be fine.
Now, most people...
And if you're interested in people,
yeah,
it's so important. I mean, I know magicians that aren't, they're technically way better than me, but they don't have as many bookings because they don't relate to the people as well.
Right.
And if you're painting, you have to relate to the model, you have to relate to the people, you have to relate to the landscape.
Did you always have good people skills, or did you have to develop those?
I think I always had. I always liked people.
Yeah.
I always really liked people.
Yeah.
And I read when I was really young the Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends, Win Friends and
Influence People. Yeah.
And I only remember one thing from that, which serves me to this day. He says, when you make a mistake, say you're wrong. It's just flat out say, "Oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Say it. And it's simple. you know.
So you got back from Europe and from South America, or Central America, and then what happened there?
So I landed back in New York. I was 24, and I was drawing and painting at the time, selling my art. You know, again, I get back, I said, you know what, I should just paint and go to the streets. So I do all my artwork in my studio, and on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, I'd go on the streets and I'd sell it on the streets. And then from there, I got commissions. So it was pretty smart. You know, it was a business model.
Right.
You know, except I did get arrested once. And got.
Tell me about that.
Oh, this. Oh man, this is a good one. So I'm selling my art on the street, on Bleecker Street in New York City, and next to me is this bookseller who's selling art books. The cop comes up and says, it was undercover. He said, "Oh, I love the paintings. How much?" I said, $25 for this. And he says, "Okay, I'm a police officer. I have to arrest you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, come on." He's like, "No, I'm sorry. I have to have this number of callers this month. I have to take you in. But don't worry, I'll get you out fast."
Oh.
I said, "But what about the guy selling art books? I mean, I'm selling my own art, you know." And he's like, "Oh, protected by the First Amendment." I said, "So's the art." He's like, "Come on." He said, "Just come in." So I said, "Fine." Handcuffed me, put me in the pad, you know, in the wagon. And there's all these watch sellers, you know, and because back in '89 in New York, and back in '94 in New York, Alphabet City was bad, and there was a lot of crime on the streets. So they just go around and arrest everyone. We're sitting there, and right before we get to the station on 42nd Street, the officer says, "Oh, hey Johnny, I'm thirsty. Can you get me a Coke at the deli?" So one of them goes out to get a Coke. There were two officers. And I said, "Hey, I'll take a Pepsi too." He's like, "You're handcuffed. Sit in the back. You'll be at the station soon." I said, No, get me a Coke." He's like, "You ain't got no money." I said, "No, here's $2.
You got out of the
He's
cuffs.
like, "Where's the cuffs?" I was like, "The cuffs are on this wrist." He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm a magician." He's like, "Put the cuffs back on." So anyway, he got me the Coke. And then we went to 42nd Street, and I did card tricks for everyone in there, you know, and it was fun.
Didn't have to go to court or anything?
Didn't have to go. Well, no, I did have to go to court, but the guy processed me quickly. He said, "Listen, I'm going to process you quickly." He did, got me out, and then you just go to court and you say, "Hi, I was selling me artwork. I was selling artwork," and every judge would go, "Dismissed." They knew that, you know.
They just didn't want somebody selling stolen goods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you later then ended up in art school again.
I did. So this is what's interesting. So I was doing my artwork there for a while. I was a cabinet maker for years.
Really?
Yeah.
Woodworker.
Woodworker. Yeah. I did high-end millwork, architectural millwork, for New York City, and I did that for a while, and painted on days I wasn't working.
Right.
I did magic at night, so I was like full working, and then I decided, you know what, I want to go back and really learn much more deeply how to paint.
Now, what age were you by this time?
I was 35. So I was 10 years had gone. And I was 35, and I saw some of the work of Jacob Collins online, and I was just, phenomenal.
Doesn't get much better than that.
Doesn't get much better than that, right? So I was working, by the time I was a job super on construction sites. And I'd been promoted up the line, and I used to run these gigantic townhouse renovations, on Fifth Avenue. And I said, that's it, I'm going to go study with this guy. So I called him, and he says, "Hi." He said, "Da-da-da." "Sure, come in." And I said, "I'd love to study nights with you." He says, "Sorry, can't do it." He says, "If you're going to study with me, you got to do 5 days a week from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. So I quit my job 4 months later.
Oh, wow.
Just quit my job. And I said, okay, I'll stop doing construction. I'll paint all day with Jake at the Water Street Atelier, and I'll do magic at night. And so I went from making nice money to taking a big gamble. I took a very large gamble. And this was in the downturn when the market crashed.
Right.
In 2008. So
Right.
the market tanked. And here I am quitting my secure job to go study art and do card tricks.
Yeah.
But I was like...
Well, you got to burn the bridges behind you.
At some point, you got to
Right.
go and go for what you love. So I did it, studied studied with Jacob. Ted Minoff was there, Cami Salaz, were my teachers, and very rigorous training. But so this is the interesting point where I really got into landscapes. I went there to study the figure, but in the summer they had the Hudson River Fellowship, and I got selected twice to go paint up in the Catskills. 6 in the morning, Jake would say, "Okay, if you want to ride with me, get there at 6 in the morning." And then we'd paint all day, and then we'd paint sunsets at night, which would be around 9 o'clock in the summer. So we had 4 or 5 weeks in the summer where we just, long days.
I think it'd be good to talk about the Hudson River Fellowship because it's such a wonderful program and a lot of people don't know it exists.
Oh, okay.
So for these people who are watching, maybe give us kind of a condensed version of what it is.
Okay. Well, the Hudson River Fellowship is based out of the Grand Central Academy, or Atelier, run by Jacob Collins. And essentially it's a fellowship. They select a certain number of people to spend about 4 weeks up in the Catskill Mountains painting every day. And often there's senior fellows, called senior fellows, like myself, Eric Kopel, Tom Kegler, Jacob, Ted Minoff, that we go and we work with the fellows to teach them how to paint the landscapes, at a higher level. So it's very intense.
So you say at a higher level, but in Jacob's school, it's mostly figurative, drawing and figurative. So were you getting any kind of landscape training in that school?
Zero.
So a lot of the people that go to the fellowship were not really trained in landscape painting when they started.
Exactly.
So they're going there, and out of the box, are they learning to paint in plein air? Are they drawing? What's the process?
The system is set up where you go in the first few days or week, you're supposed to do a lot of drawings. So a lot of drawings of the landscape. And then you do grisaille paintings of the landscape. And then
Explain that for everybody.
Grisaille is when you do a painting with one color and white, essentially. So you have
a value study.
A value study.
Right.
So it's a fancy French word, grisaille, for a black and white painting. And you're studying the values of the landscape or the subject matter. So a lot of the people it's all plein air. It's all plein air there, and no photography. He's really
right. Well, Jacob doesn't like photography.
No, he doesn't like his photography. Yeah, he's like really harsh on it, and which actually is a wonderful thing.
Great training.
It's great training. They say like the dialogues we have of Plato today are from people memorized the dialogues. They memorized what the dialogues were.
Yeah.
So they say, so what happened the other night? And then it's a memory. So we as artists can develop a visual memory every bit as detailed as the Platonic dialogues or of Shakespeare. You have the Shakespearean actors that remember every play. Well, as artists, if you look, you can train your visual memory.
Well, and I think that's so important because most of the landscape painters in the world have never gone out on location. Most of the landscape painters are painting from photographs, and I'm not trying to diss that concept, but you have a lot of people out there who essentially don't understand light and form and shape and color like they would see it in person, right? So when you do it in person, it completely changes everything. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'll go from the study with Jacob to the plein air.
Okay.
Because the thing about, we weren't doing landscapes at the school. We were studying cast drawings and models. You have something that doesn't move with a fixed atmospheric conditions and a fixed light source. So everything's set.
Right.
But you learn the principles. You learn the principles of value, form, right? You go out in plein air, the light's moving, nothing's staying where it is, the clouds are changing, the shadows all the time. So you have to learn to take the principles you learn of painting and apply it to the landscape. Now, that forces you in the landscape to look deeper, to look more, look more comprehensively, and to try to take a snapshot of the whole to get it on your painting. Now, also, all these moments changing with the sun changing, all these brilliant moments happen. The light, hits the lake. You see all these beautiful things, and you can take these different moments of time and combine them onto a canvas to one moment of time. In a photograph, you're stuck with one moment.
Right.
It's,
But once you've been outdoors and you've painted outdoors a lot, to get a lot of experience with it, and you start seeing how light falls across the tree, or how light falls on the leaves, or whatever it is. Now, when you're painting from a photograph, you can actually make it look real.
Yeah, you can. Yes.
But I often tell the story of this Russian master who visited our place at the lake with me, and he walked into my studio, and he went, that one, that one, that one, that one. And I said, what do you mean? He says, that one you did from plein air, that one. You did those from plein air, the rest were done from photographs. And he totally nailed it, because he knew exactly, he could tell. And at the time, my eye wasn't trained enough to be able to tell. Now I can tell, at least I think I can. Now there are people who are so experienced at outdoor painting, plein air painting, that they're able to now fake it from a photograph and make it look really real. But I still can't paint from a photograph. I'll paint from a study, but I don't do photographs, because they lack information for me. So I'd rather just be outdoors.
Yeah, they do lack it. What they do is they compress the values. First of all, the values get shifted. The color gets changed.
Right.
And depending on the lens, the drawing is distorted.
Right.
So you have to correct all these things.
Right.
And so I find it as a disadvantage. But like what you're saying, plein air, I paint in the studio all winter. So by the time spring comes around, I'm dying to get out.
Right.
Because it's like all these fresh impressions.
You don't like to go out in the winter?
I used to. But nowadays, with galleries and, the demand for work, I have to hunker down and do these larger paintings in the studio all winter.
Sure, yeah.
And then in the spring I go out and do in the summer, all the paintings. So I like to do these small 7x12s, which the demo I did for the video, it started with a little small 7x12 sunset, and then I do that 12x16, and then I do several of those different scenes, and then that one would work 16:20.
Yeah. So you do on your studio paintings, you're doing a lot of glazing and a lot of layering, I would assume.
A lot of layering. Yeah, it's the indirect method of painting, where I do one layer on top of the next, which I love, because it allows for a lot of control. You can really control your values and what you want to move and push. You control the intensity of your colors. You can up, out of gray, more neutral, more intense, or more chromatic. And you have the advantage of all these techniques. You can glaze. Now I'm going to scumble. Now I'm going to go impasto.
Right.
Now I'm going to sand it down and glaze on top of that.
Right.
You have all these tricks that you can pull off.
Yeah, all you need is time, drying time, and time.
Yeah, drying time and time.
Drying time and time.
But if you're working on 5, I work on 3, 4 to 5 paintings at once. So I'll do this one, set it aside. Next day I'll do this one, and it's like a merry-go-round. By the time I get back to the first one, it's dry.
Right. So Ken, one thing you're probably pretty proud of is that you have a new book out. The book is called Landscapes in Oil. So I understand that most art instruction books are not on sale in museum stores like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but this one is. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's that's been a dream of mine, to have my artwork in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. But I'll take the book.
Yeah.
So it sells right there at the Metropolitan Museum. And what's wonderful, because some of the illustrations of the masterpieces that are in the book, Frederick Church and others, are in the museum. So you can go look at the piece at the museum, go get the book, and then in the book I break down the techniques they use to create these masterpieces. Yeah, I was really happy. Felt very honored with Victoria from Monticelli Press to invite me to do this book, because growing up, I had mentioned earlier, I had studied how to draw trees, or how to draw rocks and skies, but there was never a comprehensive book that taught you in the classical tradition, like the Hudson River tradition, how to paint a landscape in its entirety.
Right.
And you just can't find it. So when they asked me to do a book, I said, this has never been done. I'm going to give you something that's never been done, which is how to paint a landscape in the Hudson River tradition, the classical, with multiple passes, multiple layers, and basing everything, all the things I teach in the book are based on principles that I illustrate that the great masters are using. So all their compositional elements, how they use value, how they use drawing in perspective, how they use color, I break their paintings down in the beginning of the book, and then I do demonstrations later to show how to actually create a painting underneath those principles.
Well, it's a beautiful book. I was flipping through it, just seeing it for the first time today, so I'm anxious to get my own copy. I have friends in high places. Maybe I can get a copy somewhere.
Oh, that's already been submitted. The other thing about it's not just the techniques from the Hudson River School. They had an entire philosophy about man's relationship to nature.
Mm-hmm.
And man's relationship to nature, divinity.
Very spiritual.
Very spiritual. And that's the difference between painting pretty landscapes and deep, profound, meaningful landscapes, is the reason why you're painting it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read them, you read Church, you read Thomas Cole's writings, they're talking about the very deep mystical aspects of light and nature. And so I discuss in my book that the power behind their paintings is, yes, their technical mastery, but that is the foundation in which the vision and the transcendent ideas are expounded upon, that they're painting, for which they're painting for. You know.
Now, what about you? What about in your own work?
The same thing. The
Mm-hmm.
same idea. Every painting has a main idea behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I title the paintings, that'll give you an idea what I was thinking. The one painting's titled Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
The other one's another one painted called Annunciation.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of birth, divine birth, spiritual birth.
Mm-hmm.
So the titles will tell you, in my mind, the idea that's driving all the decisions that are made on the painting.
So from what I've read about some of those guys, Church and others, is that the act of painting, in their case, was also an act of prayer.
Absolutely. Gosh, Eric, this is where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
I call it contemplative painting,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not just looking at a mountain and saying, oh, this is the mountain, I'm painting a mountain. You're not just looking at the sun, oh, I'm painting the sun. No, you are, I see it as a deep meditation, a deep prayer,
Mm-hmm.
To the wonderness, the absolute mystery and
Mm-hmm.
beauty of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And in our own little way, we're recreating what a universe that's already been created.
The only difference is you're having to compress it down to 7 values.
Yeah, exactly. We have to compress the values, and we have to make it two-dimensional.
That's right. And you still have to make that sun look like it's glowing and, and bright.
Exactly. So no, I agree. It's people ask me, oh, you're so deep. You read, Emerson. You love Thoreau. Do you meditate? I'm like, no, I paint.
Yeah.
That's it.
So let's get back to magic. It's fascinating. So you asked me a question before we started the interview, and so I'm gonna let's go through that.
Okay.
That now.
So I asked you a question, simple question. I said, Eric, think of a friend from high school or college.
Right.
And I also gave you an envelope, which is in your pocket.
Right.
Okay. Sealed.
Sealed
Okay,
envelope.
So I haven't figured out what the name is. Would you like me to do it now?
Sure.
Okay, so this is where I jump into Eric's mind.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
I'm putting.
I
have lead all around my head. You can't get in there.
All right, this is how it's going to work. I want you to say the name in your mind.
Yep.
Say it again in your mind.
Yep.
Did you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a short name.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I said, did you say it? And you said, mm-hmm. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
You said, mm-hmm, it's a short. That mm-hmm is what I was waiting for. Because that response when I ask the question gives me the idea of what syllable. So it's a 2-syllable word. People, when I say, did you say it? They go, mm-hmm. Or they go, okay. So you gave me an mm-hmm. That means it's a 2-syllable word. Now spell the name in your mind. Don't move your lips. I read lips.
Oh, yeah, you do.
I do. All right, it ends with a Y.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how I knew that?
No.
About 80% of all childhood friends end with Y. So that was just a stab in the dark. All right. Okay. Now, but we're going to get much more complicated. Think of a vowel that's in the name.
Okay.
That's an A.
Yep.
Okay. He said okay. So it has an A and it ends with a Y. Think of another letter in the name, but not the first letter. Don't go with the D. People like to think this is a sharp letter, D. So, and then you're hopping to the N. You're like N D N D. Yeah. It's got to be Randy.
Yeah, I don't know how you did it. Okay, so.
So why do you have that? Is that stapled? Is that sealed?
This is stapled.
Okay, Ken's big prediction.
Ken's big prediction.
Now,
so,
what's one memory you have with this friend, Randy?
we were on TV together when we were teenagers on a TV show called The Ann Clone Show.
Okay. So, take it and just rip it halfway down the middle. That way you just, there you go. There should be something, there we go, a little card in there.
That's your picture on it.
Yep. Astonishment Inc. And
you were on The Ann Clone Show with Randy. Wow. How'd you figure that out? Now, I told you, you wrote this down that I was on The Ann Clone Show, but how did you figure out his name so soon? So early? Didn't you have to go through all that with me?
No, but it's fun, isn't it?
Wow, that's amazing. Now, so Ken did this on stage in front of 1,000 people at the Plein Air convention.
That's right.
He stood up there and, I don't know, he pulled an envelope out of the audience, and I don't know how he manipulated the audience, but you blew everybody away.
Yeah.
That's, what else am I thinking? Talk to me about mentors and about learning to paint, because the act of learning to paint has some difficulty, maybe a lot of difficulty. But the thing I think that is the missing link, there are a lot of good teachers out there, but there is a lack of encouragement and there's a lack of a roadmap. So what I mean by that is when I first learned to paint, nobody said, this is what you're going to go through. So instead, I would go through these stages of frustration and almost quit many times. And I know so many people who have quit, who got to the point where they think they should be better than they are by a certain point in their journey. And I think that what would be really wonderful is when you get a new student for the first time, you say, okay, here's what you're going to go through. Here's what your roadmap's going to look like. You're going to do this, then you're going to study this for a while, and then you're going to do this, and you're going to go to this level, and you're going to do that. And during each of these stages in between, you're going to have some moments where you're going to get frustrated and you're going to want to quit. That's normal. It's okay to go through that. Because I think that there's so many people who have stopped painting, stopped drawing, because we have this belief in our system that because you're an artist, it comes naturally. You know, we don't think that about brain surgeons or musicians, but we think it about artists, and the reality is that art is a learned skill. Now, there is some talent that comes later down the road maybe, but most of that is about practicing. It's like your magic. You're just practicing it constantly, and that's when you get good at it. Same thing with the hand-eye coordination with the pencil. So talk to me about learning and what you think the journey really is and the best way to learn as an artist.
I couldn't agree with you more that there are, in the stages of learning art, frustrating areas, where you advance and then you get frustrated and you want to throw it away. I've put my hand through canvases, in my day, getting so frustrated. So the importance of a mentor, the importance of learning from somebody cannot be stressed enough. In every profession, if you're doing tennis, they have a tennis coach. I have friends that are opera singers in New York. They have voice coaches. They're singing at Carnegie Hall, but they have coaches for those.
See, all the best people in any profession have a coach.
Absolutely. All of them have coaches. And so with art, I think that you have to go and seek out those who can teach you. Now, there's two different things to that. You can first start with someone's artwork you love. You say, oh, I love their work, and then see if they teach. That's the first stage. Now, there's the artist and then there's the teacher.
Right.
So just because you might love their artwork doesn't mean you can learn as much from them, which isn't saying anything wrong with anybody.
Some people are not good teachers.
Right. So you have to experiment with a few people, and then when you find someone whose art you love, and then the system they're teaching really makes sense to you, I really would suggest you stick with it. Stick with them for a while. Really learn their method, because the other problem is if you hop around a little too much, then you're trying to synthesize too many approaches.
Yeah.
Because every great teacher, every great artist has found their method of approaching the difficulties of painting.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I get bored easily. I like a lot of different styles of painting. I went for 2 or 3 years. Well, I studied under 2 or 3 different people every week. And so, one was a colorist and one was loose brush strokes, one was tight brush strokes. And so I was getting a lot of information, but it was really hard for me to synthesize that. And it was not until I decided to stabilize on one. Now, not because I want to paint like that person or copy anyone, but in my particular case, it was one specific artist who I hired to come in and work with me. And then I just told myself, I'm not changing my color palette, I'm not changing my style, I'm just going to stick with this. And then when I finally did that, my growth was rapid.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't, because especially if you found someone you really liked, you liked their work, you liked their teaching method, so you stuck with one way. The funny thing is, all the teachers are teaching a very similar thing at their core. They're going to teach you how to draw, they're going to teach you how to work with values, and they're going to teach you how to work with color, right? So they're going to teach the same essential principles, but how they interpret it and how they transmit it is different with each artist, So I often say to my students, I say, if it's with me, if you want to study with others, stick with them for a while, because it's like when you go to sit at the piano, the notes are always the same. It's the same notes. You go to the guitar, it's the same notes. That's like you studying with consistency. Then you can learn the scales. Then you can learn the simple tune, and then you're doing Beethoven's Ninth. Same thing, you want to stick with one teacher for a while, so you have that consistency. It's that one consistent way. And then you can transpose to different styles.
Right.
Once you learn the fundamentals.
Right. Well, I think it's critical. We also, another thing that we have in our society is this idea that practice makes perfect, and practice makes permanence, but it doesn't make perfect.
It's very
bad practice is permanent just as much as good practice is. And so, the idea of finding a mentor like you, for instance, that's so important. That we have this badge of courage that I'm self-taught. But all that means is that you slowed down the process, right? You took 20 years to learn what you could have learned in 5 or 2 or whatever the case may be. And I've found that the brilliant people in any category, they not only have coaches, but they have mentors. And they say, you know what, this person spent 20 or 30 years figuring this out. I'm going to go just be under them, study under them for a long period of time, and that is going to change me. And that's how people really grow fast. And that's why things like workshops are good, but having that stability of going in on a week-to-week basis is good. That's why video is good, because you can watch it and then practice it and go back and watch it again. There's a lot of different methods, but they're all good. But you don't want to be practicing something that's bad.
Yes. Man, you're saying it. You're hitting the nail on the head. On one painting that I'm doing, even one painting, I'll still make the same mistakes I made 5 years ago if I'm not paying attention. They'll come up, and the difference now is, rather than try to fix the mistake by making it worse, by having studied with a mentor and teachers, their voice actually comes to my head.
Right.
No, vary your edges here. Vary your edges. Oh, boom, that's right. There's the answer,
I find that one of the biggest problems that I have is that I get lazy when I paint. And so, like last night I was painting, and I needed to put more color up, but I didn't want to stop, and so I'm trying to make other things work. And then I'm wiping it down, and so things like that. Sometimes you just got to stop and get back to it.
You get lazy on your painting, and you try to make it work anyway and skimp. I've found over the years is that's the perfect time to stop and take a break.
Yeah.
Go eat a taco. I don't know. Go relax. Go drink some water, and then come back, and then because you're just gonna make bigger mistakes.
I'll put my roll of paper towel across the room, and when I need a new piece of paper towel, I'll have to walk away from the painting because otherwise I don't remember to walk away. Right? I'll sit there and intensely work on it for 30 or 45 minutes, but if I have to go across the room to get my paper towel, then at least I get some perspective, and then I see, because you got to catch all those mistakes.
Yeah.
I know you don't make any.
No, I make a ton of mistakes. That's I studied with this teacher from the Repin Academy.
Mm-hmm.
I did private lessons with him for about 3 years.
His name was?
His name was Leonard Gervitz.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful human being and a wonderful teacher. And I was studying. I was getting frustrated, and he says, "You have to understand, the process of painting is fixing all the mistakes you're making all the time,
right,
and leaving what's corrected."
Right.
And he said that, and it changed my approach. I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about the mistakes. They're going to happen.
Right.
It's just learning how to fix them. That's why I'm studying with you. I'm learning how to fix the mistakes.
Right. So any final words of encouragement to the people who might be watching this? Maybe they're new at painting, maybe they're established. Any final thoughts for them?
Yeah, I would say that if you see paintings that you love by other artists and they really move you, I would say take a moment and really look at them and ask yourself, why does this painting work? Just really study it. So why does it work? Mm-hmm. Very simply, how's the drawing, how's the value, how's the color? And I would say copy those paintings, mm-hmm. Okay, first of all. And then not just copy them. This is something people don't tell you to do, but I'll say it. So here's a painting by so-and-so. Copy that painting. Then go do a plein air piece, select a similar time of day, and try to do a plein air piece in that style and how you copied it.
Right.
Then that's going to teach you how they translated nature into what they did. You see? And then you can take that to the studio and actually fix it. You can look at their painting, look at your copy of the painting, look at your plein air piece, and make adjustments. I tell you, I did that, and you just learned so much from it. And as far as encouragement, we're doing this because we love it.
Right.
We're painting landscapes. We're painting actually anything because we love the act of painting. And that has to always remind you that there is a reason why you're doing it that's greater than any of the difficulties. Right. Even if you're raising kids, it can be difficult. But you love your children so much, it's like
right.
You just go right through it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the second thing, the reward of when you push through difficult times, and you pull a painting out of the fire, as they say, and you've done it. It's like you're like Rocky at the top of the steps in Philly. You're like, right. Yes, this one came out.
Right.
Hurrah!
Yeah. Well, this has been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you, and hope to see you again soon.
Great. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. Ken Salaz. Well, that's Ken Salaz and Majestic Landscape Painting. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. I'm Eric Rhodes.
The beauty of landscape painting is an American tradition, rooted in the Hudson River School painters who brought majestic landscapes to America through their paintings over 100 years ago. Artists like Frederick Church, Thomas Cole, Asher B. Durand, and others made up this movement, and since then, American artists have tried to master the drama and light of these techniques. One artist who has worked to master these techniques as part of the coveted Hudson River Fellowship is talented magician, mentalist, artist, and fellowship instructor Ken Salaz. In this instructional video, Ken, who was named as a living master by the Art Renewal Center in 2018, is going to show you how to paint magical landscapes like the Hudson River school painters did. Follow along with Ken as he shares his love of landscapes and answers the one question he is most often asked by his students. How do you take the complexity of nature, the changing light conditions, the movement, and all the elements, and make a painting that is cohesive and filled with poetry and meaning? To help his students and you to really grasp the concepts, Ken has created the butterfly system, taking 3 elements that are in the landscape in reality and the 3 elements of painting and bringing them together in the middle with specific techniques and application.
Here with this, the way the lighting is in the studio, you see the shadow of the brush on the canvas? Well, that's actually the shadow that's cast by that light source.
You'll always know how to move your painting forward rather than getting stuck in repetitive mistakes. You will genuinely appreciate Ken's casual and encouraging teaching style. His skills as an entertainer shine through, making it easy and fun to learn from him.
Although Dante's talking about much larger things, I really can see this apply to color. Pure essence and pure matter, and the two joined into one, were shot forth without flaw, like 3 bright arrows from a 3-stringed bow.
Available on DVD or on digital to watch on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. Order your copy of Majestic Landscapes with Ken Salaz today.